Hello, welcome to the Drive Mod. My name's Anthony, and on today's video, we're going to be doing the water pump on this 2011 Chevy Cruze with the 1.8 liter Ecotec engine. All right, so before we get into that, we're going to talk about what's going on and how a water pump can fail. So your water pump is going to be the mechanical aspect of the engine that circulates the coolant throughout the engine. And there's basically, I guess, the three common ways a water pump is going to fail is one, it's going to start leaking. Two, the bearing that the water pump kind of rides in the housing can fail, and it can cause excessive play in the shaft, and the pulley, and the actual rotor itself. And then the third way is it's definitely less common nowadays, but the actual water pump, like the plastic wheel that's inside the water pump housing, can fail. So this one is failed in a way that it still operates, but it's just the bearing, it's inside, it's making a lot of noise, and over time that will wear out the housing and cause a leak. So we're going to go ahead and replace that today. The water pump on the 1.8 liter Ecotec engine is located right here on the passenger side front of the engine, all the way at the top, so it's nice and easy to get to. So here's our new pump. So again, as I was saying, this plastic wheel that can disintegrate, that's one way it can fail. The shaft that this wheel rotates on can fail, and that's what this one has done. Or it can just start leaking from the gasket here. So we're going to start it up and show you what it sounds like. So if you have this noise, pay attention, because this is your issue. If you touch the housing, you can definitely feel, and you can see the pulley moving side to side very slightly. All right, so in order to do this job, you're going to want to go ahead and jack the front of the vehicle up so that you can drain the coolant out. Or, if you don't have an access to something like this, the second option is going to make a mess, but you can just go ahead and, when you take off the water pump, all the coolant that is able to leak out will, and you're going to lose, like the top half of the cooling system. So we're going to try and catch as much as we can. All right, so the way we're going to go about this is we're going to get everything disassembled, and then before we pull the water pump off, then we're going to go ahead and drain the cooling system. Or you can go ahead and drain the cooling system first, and then, disassemble everything. So the first thing you want to do is take a T45 Torx bit and break loose these bolts that are on the water pump pulley. You want to do this with the belt. You don't take them out, but with the belt on, it helps keep tension on the pulley, so that it doesn't want to spin while if you take the belt off, it's just going to want to spin while you're trying to break the bolts loose. And sometimes they can be kind of somewhat corroded in there, so just break those bolts loose. Next, you're going to need a 12-point 19mm socket to attach to the pivot point on the dry belt tensioner, which is about at the 6-7 o'clock position in relation to the water pump pulley. So yeah, 19mm 12-point socket. And then you're going to rotate it counterclockwise to release the tension. Then you can go ahead and remove the belt. Make sure you note the serpentine belt's orientation when doing this. That way you can put it on, correctly after you're done. When you take the serpentine belt off, make sure you inspect it for cracking and signs of unusual wear. This one looks good, but if it was frayed, the ribs were showing on the the flat side of the belt, or the ribs were cracked, we would go ahead and replace that now since we're already taking it off. But this one looks good, so we're going to reuse it. Next, we're going to go ahead and finish off removing that pulley by removing those 3 T45 bolts. All right, we've got the 3 bolts removed, and the pulley is going to come off with it. Just put those in a parts tray or something so you don't lose any of these, because we're going to reuse this stuff. We've got these silicone mats from Grypmats. Awesome tool for professional or at-home DIYs. So the reason we have to remove the pulley before we remove the water pump is it blocks all these little bolts, these little E10 bolts. But now we're at the point where we're going to drain the cooling system. So if you're going to do this in the least messiest way possible, we're going to get under the vehicle, remove the splash shield, and then access the drain the drain point on the radiator, which is on the passenger front side. We really only need to remove this front portion of the skid plate, which is held on by these 2-piece retainer clips. So you're going to pop the middle out with a trim tool, and then once you get the middle portion out, then you can remove the whole clip. And then these T20 bolts all along the front. Right, so once you remove that skid plate on just the front portion, the drain point on the radiator is right here. Before you release this, you're going to go up top and remove the cooling cap to allow the system to basically drain out properly. All right, so to drain this without really making a mess, if you have some sort of like 3/8 line and a small clamp, you can attach it to the drain out portion before you release this. But then you can go ahead and turn it all the way, and then this will more or less allow you to control where the coolant is going to drain off to. So you can open the valve, not too far to where it comes back out of the valve, but just let that drain. Once it's done draining, you can go ahead and close the valve and remove the line. And at this point, you can put the skid plate back on. All right, once you've got the belt and pulley removed, the cooling system drained, now we can remove the water pump from the water pump housing. To do that, you're going to release these E10 bolts around the housing. So once you release those bolts, you just pull the water pump back from the water pump housing. It should separate pretty easily. You may have some residual coolant that leaks down, so have your drain bucket ready to catch that. But we are done. Now we're gonna just clean up the surface where the water pump mounted to the housing. You can use like a razor blade or some Scotch-Brite, something just to clean up the area just a little bit, and then we can put the new water pump and gasket on. Now what you do is put the gasket on the new water pump. You're gonna mount it up to the housing and then thread in those E10 bolts by hand just to get it started. So how I did it was I held the housing up with one hand, kept it flush against the water pump housing, and then I threaded in 2 of the bolts hand tight all the way down so the pump can't move anymore, so the gasket doesn't somehow slip out. Then you can go ahead and thread the rest of them in and tighten them all down. Once you've got the water pump tightened back up to the water pump housing, then now it's just reassembly. So you're going to put the pulley back on, start threading in the pulley bolts by hand. Yeah, just line each hole up, start threading it in, and run them down by hand as tight as you can. Then go ahead and tighten them down with your T45 as much as you can. Again, the pulley's going to want to spin, so we're going to tighten them down as much as we can with the ratchet. Then we're going to put the belt on, and then we're going to finish tightening them down. Just kind of the exact reverse procedure as removal. All right, so put the pulley back on. Now we got the belt on. Again, refer to your diagram, or if you were paying attention to how it came off. This one has 5 pulleys. You've got the water pump pulley, AC compressor pulley, crank pulley, tensioner pulley, and the alternator. So if you're looking at it like this, it's going to go from the alternate. If we're starting the top left, it's going to go from the alternator. It's going to go straight across to the water pump pulley, straight down to the AC compressor, and then straight to the left to the crank pulley, and then up and to the right of the crank pulley, around the tensioner pulley, and then back to the alternator. So now we can go ahead and finish tightening down these water pump pulley bolts. Take your time when putting that belt back on. Make sure it goes into the ribs and fully seats in the grooves in every single pulley, because you do not want that belt to come off or get torn apart. So once you've got all that put back together, tightened up, now we can go ahead and add coolant. To refill this cooling system, you're going to use a high quality coolant. This is Amsoil's passenger car antifreeze and coolant. It's compatible with all coolant and OEM, import, domestic cars, everything. It's already pre-mixed 50-50, and it's pre-mixed with high quality distilled water. You don't want to use water out of the tap, or basically you want to use distilled water because of all the sediments and particulates that is in, you know, regular tap water. That stuff gets into the cooling systems. It causes havoc inside radiators, blocks, all that. So definitely get yourself, you know, Amsoil's coolant. Again, already pre-mixed 50/50 with distilled water. We're gonna go ahead and add the coolant into the reservoir until it's at the full line. When you do start adding the coolant, make sure you do check for leaks, you know, around the water pump, because there's a gasket right there. And then check beneath, you know, make sure you're not leaking anything from the draining point of the radiator. So just keep filling the reservoir up. It's gonna burp and bubble as air pockets come out. Just keep topping it off until it stops doing that and is at the fill mark or the full mark. Once we've got the coolant reservoir to the full mark, now we're gonna get inside the vehicle and start it. So you're just gonna wanna start it. Put it on max heat. That way you get, you know, as much of the cooling system to circulate as possible, and just let it idle. All right, for this portion, go ahead and put the cooling cap back on the system and let it idle and get to full operating temperature. Once the vehicle gets to operating temperature, let it idle for about 10 minutes. Open the coolant reservoir cap and top off as needed. But other than that, you know, monitor the level the next couple days to see if you have any more air pockets come out of the system. You know, double check your work. That's all it takes to replace a water pump on a 1.8 liter Ecotec engine in a 2011 Chevy Cruze. This will apply to the, you know, the other model years of the Chevy Cruze with the 1.8 liter. Thanks for watching. Hope you found this video helpful. Appreciate if you did like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Greatly appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, thanks for checking us out. Hope you helped you out today. And we'll see you again on the next video here at the Driver Mod. Take care.